television, the final frontier.
Podcasting, the final frontier.
These are the pods of the podcast Flashback 64. Okay, it's not working out. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Flashback 64. I am your captain, Gooey, and I'm joined, as always, by my number one, Commander Krebs. Hello, McKenna.
Hello. Commander Krebs is your new name now.
Yeah. And we are joined, I think this is the first time officially just as a straight up guest and not a crossover with our pod, but we're joined. So now you are your ensign, Munger.
Hell yeah. Yes.
Cadet.
Hello. I don't know. I'm not really familiar with the ranking system. I mean, I could make something up, but I'm not as familiar with it.
Yeah, since you're okay, this is our first foray into television on the show. And if you don't know about Star Trek, don't turn it off. We'll explain. You don't have to be into Star Trek to listen to this episode, I don't think. But we'll get into that deal. But yeah, TV. We've hit a lot of things in the N64 era. Mm-hmm. We've done plenty of movies, some music stuff now at this point. But TV, we don't even really. It's hard to It's sometimes hard to know how to cover it, just because so much is produced. Even then, a lot was made, I feel like, and it's hard to give a, we've talked about some shows when they debut or something like that, but it's harder to track than like what was the number one movie that week. At least I think. I don't know. So this is our first real attempt at TV, and it makes sense to do because it's a show that McKenna and I both collectively like a lot. Mm-hmm. It's we're going to be talking about Star Trek: The Next Generation today, and it started in the 80s, but it really it's really the 90s were such a booming time for Star Trek, and this was kind of based on you had kind of the kernel of the idea, and then I took it and went completely crazy in another direction. But do you want to say what your inspiration for like kind of talking about Star Trek first was, other than we both love it?
Yeah, so it came from another Star Trek show, Deep Space Nine, which runs through the 90s. And there is an episode that takes place in summer 2024.
Yeah.
Whoa.
They go to summer 2024.
I did not know that.
It's a tumultuous era.
It's not. Things aren't good.
I don't know what you're talking about.
They didn't predict anything.
I kind of had bubbling in my head like that I wanted to talk about Star Trek, and then McKenna mentioned this, and I kind of like then jumped on it with my idea of like, wait, I want to talk about Star Trek on like the larger sort of level. So we'll get to that episode eventually, though, because it's one of the greats of Deep Space Nine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are. So the idea here is if you're listening and you are curious about Star Trek, I feel like you can listen to this episode and get an idea of if these sound cool or not. And the way the tricky thing about covering TV, like I said, is like there's so many episodes they make of any given show, even the ones that don't last, like a season is quite many hours of TV. So it's like, do you watch it all? What do you do? That's something we've been talking about, some other shows we want to talk about. And we sort of came up with, kind of on accident, first we picked a handful of episodes that were just good, And then we realized we kind of had something going here, and we decided the way we wanted to present this was to provide sort of an arc of like a collection of episodes that maybe give you some story of one specific character. And Adrielle is sort of our we kind of talked about our backgrounds on our crossover episode where we talked about Star Trek the Motion Picture, but you're kind of our guinea pig here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't watched much Star Trek at all, and not because I'm not interested, but precisely because it's so there's so much content and it spans decades and decades, and you know, I'm not sure how they are related or not related. The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, you know, so there's like so many different iterations or like, you know, generations of Star Trek, and so that's part of why it feels overwhelming to get into as someone who hasn't really like ever really watched it. So I think that this was a perfect approach for someone like me, because watching one or two episodes is fine in a vacuum or whatever, but seeing it with a real arc and kind of following one character and just getting a taste, you know, it's more of like a day trip instead of a whole, you know, week-long vacation into Star Trek. And I found it to be very accessible. So really good work with that approach.
Thank you. Yeah, that's our goal here, is we kind of have prepared a pack, and you can, if you think any of them sound interesting, the beauty of it is like you can kind of watch any of these episodes out of context, and yes, like knowing certain things kind of enhances it, and as the show goes on, they have even more like follow-ups to things and stuff like that, but like you can watch pretty much any episode of Star Trek, I think, out of context, and it's satisfying to watch, don't you think, McKenna? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So I feel like we've prepared a good slate here. So like I said, the show, it really picks up in the year 1990. At the end of the third season is kind of when the show like becomes like its own thing, like where it steps out of the shadow of the original series. But we're pretty much covering episodes in that season 1, 2, 3 area. We kind of wanted to start off and give a sort of backstory on, I think is at the beginning of the show like the most standout character, which is Data. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that way?
Yeah. He's pretty different from everyone on the original series. Maybe Spock is like the most like similar character, but he's you know, he's an android.
Yeah, he's the Spock of the show, to be sure, but they're like, let's take it to an even more extreme, I guess, degree. So
it's like the character of the show that grapples with humanity the most.
Oh, big time. So and I think because of that, they, especially later on, I think the show especially does a better job with some of the other characters, but I feel like they kind of have some fertile ground to tell more interesting stories with Data early on, because I don't know if you recall, if you caught in that little documentary I was watching the other day, or we were kind of watching it together, but early on, Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, part of his vision for the show and the universe is that like humanity has solved all our problems, and so a big thing is he didn't want like conflict amongst the crew, or really any of them to have like as many flaws and things like that. Yeah.
What a strange approach to have. I've never heard of anything of a writer saying, I don't want to have any flawed characters.
I believe it was Maurice Hurley, who was like one of the early people kind of in charge of the show and wrote a lot of stuff. for the first few seasons was saying, like, especially between the first series and this, he developed this, like, philosophy, you know, where, like, humanity can, like, evolve and become better, and at this stage in our evolution, like, we have kind of solved a lot of things, and you know, a lot of the show, like, they kind of have to write a lot of episodes where they, like, fly around to other planets and kind of help them solve their problems, basically. So
now, and also just so I have my timeline right, this is the next generation is the second, like, iteration of Star Trek, right? After the first one, which started in the 60s and then, like, went into the 70s, right?
It basically ended I think it only was a few years in the 60s. We've watched together Star Trek: The Motion Picture, just from 1979, and then a lot of the films, especially Wrath of Khan, were very big in the 80s. And then this show, that gives them the opportunity to bring it back in 1988, I think, is when Next Gen begins.
Just making sure I wasn't
1987.
missing. Cool. Okay,
yeah,
great.
no, you're up to date.
I'm caught up.
As much as you need to be. I mean, so yeah, here we are. We've got a pack of episodes about Data. He can be more flawed because he's not human. He's trying to be. He himself is trying to rise above and become human. You know, he's got kind of his own mechanical issues to deal with, and just a very relatable character. But is there any? I mean, do we want to just kind of go through the episodes and use them to? I feel like they kind of help build his story, his lore, Data's lore.
Yeah, they do, I think.
Next time on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Can this be another me?
The discovery of Data's perfect android double
How much can you trust Data now?
leads to a deadly game of who's who.
He's been hurt.
This is very serious.
Now, Data's evil twin plots to destroy the crew
Back off. Go!
with the help of a lethal life force on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Okay, well then let's just, because we get you learn all you need to know about Data in the episode Datalore. At least all you need to get started. From the first season, January 18th, 1988, episode 13 of the first season. Written by Robert Lewin and Maurice Hurley, directed by Rob Bowman. And McKenna, what's this episode about? You know, we didn't prepare a statement, but just generally, what's this episode about?
So the crew is returning to the planet where Data was found, which is where he was created, and they arrive on the planet to find that it was once a planet of, like, fertile farmland and, you know, people living there, and now it's abandoned, and, you know, it doesn't look like you could plant anything there. And they're looking around, and they find, like, a mysterious this like structure that looks like it's man-made, and they go in and they find pieces of another android that looks identical to Data.
Identical, yeah.
So they take it back to the ship and assemble it, and they find Lore, Data's brother.
He's got a bro.
Who is more he has more human characteristics than Data.
Yes. He's a little sassy.
Yeah. He
is sassy.
Devious. You can't. He's definitely different from Data. He wakes up and he's much more. He's smiley. He's silly. He uses contractions.
Contractions. That's a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, the contractions are a big plot point.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess before we go further into the plot, I guess Adrielle, as the newcomer then? What was I guess in general, what was your impression of like the show, the vibes, and also Data, the character, and maybe lore even too?
Well, as I said, I had seen the motion picture, which was my first real. I mean, I had seen a couple episodes of the original, like season 1, way back. And that was like difficult to kind of like relate to or grasp onto because it's so old, really. And not that I don't love old movies and old shows, but I think that stylistically it just like felt several generations removed, so it was harder to get into. Anyway, the movie is when I really fell in love with Spock and Data, big Spock energy as we mentioned. But I immediately liked him right off the bat. And I think that this was a good episode for me, I think, to start with, because you get all of the backstory that people probably had been either wondering about or just was missing, like from Data, and like where he came from and what he exists as and why he exists. And then also on top of that, I got to see the actor playing both parts of Data and Lore, which made me really hate Lore and love Data even more, which was like a great place to start in the first act of my journey, So yeah. And it really, because they're so different, the Data and Lore, it really is, it crystallized Data's character more, like about the contractions thing and about where his loyalties lie to the ship and the crew and, his personality, quote unquote, quirks that Lore tries to sort of like take advantage of and emulate in various ways. So, yeah. So it was a great place to start, and vibe wise, impeccable. I don't know if I would feel like Deep Space Nine is even better, but I'm like, well, this is peak. How can it get any better than like, late 80s, early 90s, Whoopi Goldberg and LeVar Burton and whatever, everybody involved. Like, how can it get better than this?
True.
So that's vibe wise on point.
Did you notice, like, by the end of it, like they kind of upped the quality by the third season, I feel like. Yes. I could tell that they got better cameras or something. They looked a lot better. a lot of this, I mean, it always depends with every season, they have a limited budget, so there's always episodes where it's like, oh, maybe they kind of had to make do with this one, but like a lot of the sets and like planets they go to, like in the first season in particular, like feel way more at home like in the original series. So I don't know,
that the planet they go to in this episode definitely looks like it could be original series.
Just be like, throw some boulders down, purple backdrop.
It is, I really did. I kind of appreciated that because it's so analog, and how they had like just the props. It reminded me of like Face Off, how they had like his like the mold for his face, because he's like, I think in theory like was going to be replicated more than just once or whatever. And so then he like puts this plastic mold like on his face. It's just so analog, like if this story had come out, 30 years later, there would have been like a scan and there would have been some CG
like
stuff.
lasers or something.
Yeah, but instead they just pick up like like it looks like a plastic top of like a to-go container or something that's been like melted to the shape of his face. It's awesome. I love how analog it is.
His head just being like a shitty doll version of him is cool. Yeah. I love it. We're not going to see any here, but also I guess I'll say, just as some background information, with the first season, actually back when they were in the stages of making Star Trek the Motion Picture, I guess there previously was maybe a deal where they were going to make a TV show called Star Trek Phase 2. And they wrote a bunch of scripts for it, and then eventually somehow the plans got turned into making a movie. So they took one of those scripts and they made that into the movie. They like messed with it, but then some of the season 1 TNG scripts are rewritten versions of Star Trek Phase 2. And this isn't really touched upon but in these episodes, but there's a clear analog and some scenes that were clearly originally written for Commander Decker and Ilea that just transformed into Riker and Deanna Troi scripts. And I don't know, I guess I think that's interesting, like in the first season, both visually and with the writing. And this is where Roddenberry is still most like involved heavily. Like you still have like this kind of like a lot of this 60s show showing through. Yeah. And it's weird because the show goes, I feel like, from being a 60s show to a 90s show like really fast. But anyway, I like with Lore, I like this backstory he has where like he was made first, but he freaked everyone out too much.
Yeah, which she lies about.
Yes, he says he's the superior model to Data.
Yeah.
But yeah, like true fact of the matter is he's kind of a jerk, and like he's freaking everyone out, so they're like, tone it down, make him more like chill, you know.
Yeah, so that's why they made Data, who is like notably very chill. And in other episodes, like even under pressure, he's perhaps to the chagrin of other people on the ship, seems like very level-headed and sort of like has a very childlike kind of quality to him that I find really endearing. Although I think sometimes they're just kind of like, Data, shut up, enough with the numbers.
Yeah, especially early on, he's like kind of more like I mean, it's maybe part of his subtle character develop. It's probably more of how Brent Spiner like finds the character, but he becomes like first couple seasons he is like he's always like correcting people and stuff like that, and it's like Data. And as it goes on, like he becomes even more and more like affable and stuff like that. So I think he just maybe gets better at socializing, you know.
I think you're I don't know if you're right about that in terms of the whatever the writing, but it rings true to me that it's like they start sort of with this character that, I mean, it's, I don't know, like many good television shows, I don't know, like the first season of The Office, like Michael Scott is like quite mean-spirited, you know. And then like as the show goes on, we realize that like that's not actually who he is. And so like I think that you might be right that like they started with this idea of an android character and then like understood the nuances of it, especially in the context of the crew and like them kind of falling in love with him. So yeah, I think you might be right about that.
I feel like because a lot of these are more like like this arc we're kind of following here is more of just like who Data is, what is he like, and like is he valid? Whereas like later Data is more about him exploring his emotions and or like trying to find them in a way. And I think having this first episode with Lore, that's like the first real like big Data episode, is a great way to establish that, because we kind of see the version of him that was made like with like these emotions, and he could not handle it. So there's always that sort of like, there's that sort of struggle of like he, you know, Data wants to be more human, but like there's a danger that comes with that. That's something I always like about his character. So this early episode establishes it well.
Yeah, another way I was kind of thinking about it is like to create a fully grown sort of person that already has emotions, like,
oh yeah,
you know, people weren't meant to just be fully grown with emotions. You're supposed to be like small and harmless and figure out how to navigate your emotions in a guided way.
Oh yes,
and such a good point. Such a good point. Like, you can't come fully with batteries included, man. You gotta figure out if you run on D batteries or double A's. You know.
Yeah, I don't know the timeline of how long. Did they say how long ago it was he was discovered on the planet?
26 years ago, I think.
Okay.
Because Geordi is like, oh, this land maybe could have been used 20 to 30 years ago, and then I think Data says, oh, I was found like 26 years ago.
Right,
okay.
I remember that. That is true. And I was like, is he supposed to be 26 years old? Kind of, but I don't think so. I don't think so.
I think probably you could. I mean, his memory is wiped a little bit, right? So like, or he wasn't active that long or something. So like, I guess you could say he's 26, but he's probably, it's probably been harder for him to develop, emotionally. He's probably like, it was probably just tougher for him in that process. So
and I don't know if it was this episode or another, but they say, like, I think it was a different one. No, I think it was this one, actually. They say, you like, oh, I went through all of these steps, all of these years of like training and deciding like if I wanted to be on the ship and do, like I was vetted. Like, I didn't just like waltz in here as like a super hot android to just like be on the ship. Like,
yeah.
I did all this stuff to get here, like he really has a sense of like accomplishment and pride. I think it's sort of glossed over a bit as sort of just like, he's telling Lore, like, you can't just waltz in here and take my job, So I think that also is like that to me, not only showed that he has like some loyalty to the ship, but also that he like has his own sense of like accomplishment and memories about like who he is and the choices he makes, which comes up later in another episode.
Yeah, a sense of loyalty, like you said, a sense of duty even. And you really made me think, like, imagine you go from being not a person, you get turned on, and not in that way, but you're activated, you're engaged, and then,
engaged,
and then you're studied, but then they put you into military academy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Data is really like and in this world, we're at least at this point we're into the Starfleet values or whatever. They're good. So Data he is like he's like a Starfleet guy through and through. I feel like he embodies those values, I think, really really well. Like he I think there's other episodes they do with him, like he doesn't lie, he can't lie and stuff like that, even more so than Spock. So yeah, I don't know, that is a very interesting aspect to him. You mentioned how you kind of get to see him play both versions. That's also something they will always try to do in a lot of episodes, is like come up with a reason for Brent Spiner to act like a freak, or like something happened to Data, and now he gets to like do his little. They do that to everyone actually, but I feel like Data gets it the most, and I think it's interesting because he both is like, obviously he's the most like kind of emotionally stunted character or whatever, but I feel like that's probably one of the trickier things to act. And but then also he has to act like completely wild and crazy at times too. So quite the range I think Brent Spiner has. But so he's lying, right? Lore's lying, but what really happened? What's the deal with Lore? Why do we gotta transport him into space? McKenna.
Transport it. So they find out what happened to the planet. There's this crystalline entity.
Yes. Oh, I didn't call out. Adrielle said crystallize earlier, and I wanted to point it out.
Oh yeah,
nice job.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
It's like a planet eater. Basically,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It is a planet eater. That's awesome. It's a great way to say it.
So Lore is like working with this entity.
Yeah, he's like sending it as messages.
Right. And I was a bit unclear about the triangulation between like between Lore and then the person who created them, and also the other people who were on the planet, and also why Lore has an affinity or a death wish. I'm not really sure for this like crystallized planet eater, but I was like, it doesn't really matter. It's okay. I don't need to get like that. Something that I'm realizing about these Star Trek episodes is like, you don't have to like, because there are so many of them, you don't have to be like, it's not like a movie where you're kind of like, wait, this like what I want to understand every single thing. Like I could go back and watch this again and understand a lot of like other different things about the episode and about the characters and all this stuff. So anyway, all that's to say, I was a little confused about the Star Eater, the Planet Eater.
Yeah, I don't think you missed anything. I think it's just like that part is maybe this is honestly we didn't initially have this planned. It's a good episode, but it's definitely the weaker of the group. But we decided like, oh, this is crucial. You got to get the Data backstory here. But I think there is just kind of a lot of like. There's 2 robots. There's a crystal space monster. There's lore to like literally to figure out. So, but I think just the idea was they turned Lore off because he was freaking him out, and now he's resentful of humans. And he called. He was, I don't know. At least I think he was able to make contact with this crystalline entity or something, and I don't even quite remember, but I'm pretty sure that's just the basic idea. He's pissed off at humans. He can make a deal with this crystalline entity. He wants to eat humans, not androids, so he's gonna
right.
I don't know if he was just gonna like fly off like riding on it or something,
into the sunset.
Giddy up.
On to the next.
There's some Trek nerds who probably know like the in-depth lore.
Totally. There's some Trek nerd out there that's like making like a reference to that particular Planet Eater as we speak.
I think in season 7 we learn a little bit more about the crystalline entity, I think, but I don't remember what we actually learn. I just know we learn something. I don't know. Yeah. So whatever. They gotta figure out. Oh, it's really kind of this is sort of a thing that can be hit or miss for some people early on, but like the real person who's clued in to what's going on is Wesley Crusher. I don't know, what did you think, Adrielle, of this character of Wesley? He's kind of a contentious character on the show. Is he
contentious? Okay, he's played by
Will
a
Wheaton.
young Will Wheaton, and I was a bit confused because of like one of the first lines about him in this particular episode was like, he might look like a child, but he has the experience of someone older. I'm like, okay, so is he really a child or is he not a child? Like, is he a prodigy or is he somebody who he's just looks young?
He's like an uber prodigy, basically.
It seems that way because they have a lot of stuff about him and his mom, and that comes up again later in another episode that we watched.
Yes.
And his mom is a doctor on the ship.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's the like head doctor. Yeah. She's the bones.
Oh, right. I felt neutral on this little guy. I didn't expect him to be a contentious character. Let me put it that way. I felt like he was fine, whatever. It's a kind of a non-answer, but I guess I'm surprised. Why was he contentious? That feels surprising to me.
Well, what do you think about Wesley McKenna?
I mean, I think he's fine. I think all the hate his character got is overblown.
He's sort of he's like a boy wonder a little bit. I think people were like, Oh, he's
jealous.
written. It's sort of like most people think of him, I think, in a similar way. You think of like Anakin Skywalker a little bit in like Phantom Menace, of like, oh, there are a lot of episodes that kind of revolve around him early on, or at least he's like saves the day a couple of times. It's really not as bad as it comes off. In fact, there's some good episodes with him in it, I'd say. But this moment of "Shut Up, Wesley," where they're yelling at him in this, is kind of a viral thing because people kind of have a dislike for,
because everybody just wants him to shut up. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I did think he was a little bit weird in the last episode that we watched, which was in season 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Just because he's so much older. And he still had this kind of like little chip on his shoulder. And I was like, I don't need to watch this kid like grow up on television. Like, this is a little weird.
Well, that's you're in good luck, because he he leaves the show not long after. So
there you go.
There's a better good kid growing up in Deep Space Nine.
True. There's multiple kids actually in Deep Space Nine.
Well,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he has some good episodes, but this is kind of a somewhat accurate example of a lot of his type of things, where he knows he's kind of clued into what's going on, and people don't like want to believe him because he's a kid. But it's like also they make him like, he's like acting ensign or whatever. So it's like, what? I don't know. It's a little weird. But.
What's acting ensign? What does that mean?
Like it's just sort of like he's promoted to this. He gets this rank, but it's really just like, the captain is just like, yeah, you're ensign.
He hasn't like gone to Starfleet yet, right?
Yeah,
gotcha,
that's kind of how he's written off the show. As he eventually goes to Starfleet Academy.
I understand.
He comes back a couple times and has some misadventures with people. Ashley Judd, him
with
and
his
her
old
admiral.
pals.
Yeah, there's a really good. We'll talk about it later, but. There's a good Academy up with him, but
I'm going to say that this is another reason why this is very fun for me, because I get to just ask these questions as I go, but not like every single episode, and not knowing what's like. I had one focus, and that was Data, but I get to ask all these questions and learn all this somewhat relevant lore as I go along. So anyway, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for taking me on this journey. Riding away on the crystalline planet eater into the sunset.
That's what I love about this kind of show, is like there's all these cool characters. We don't always need to know what's going on in their day-to-day every day. They're doing their job, but then we'll get an episode that we really focus in on them, or a couple characters, and I think there's a lot of room for creative storytelling in there. It might seem restrictive, and it was in a lot of ways, the way they had to make a certain amount in a certain budget or whatever, but they did a great job.
Yeah, my interest has been piqued on like all of these characters and their relationships with each other. But anyway, we'll get into that as we go.
We will, yeah, because I have a question for you at the end. We've got the story of Data, right? Though they blast Lore out into space through the transporter. Data does use a contraction in this episode. I read. I didn't even notice it, but he does say "I'm fine," I guess, or something. The contraction thing's a little weird, but good. It's a good app. It's a good app. It's a fun app. One of the better ones in season 1, I think.
Next time on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I accept your challenge, Doctor.
I wouldn't miss it.
Dr. Pulaski challenges Data to solve a Sherlock Holmes mystery in the holodeck.
There is your killer. Seize her!
But the evil Moriarty seizes the ship's computer.
The time for games is over.
In a ruthless plot to sabotage the Enterprise on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Here's the arc I think we're following. We've got Data the guy, and we learn in some random episode they're solving a mystery, and Data discovers the character of Sherlock Holmes. He gets a pipe. You missed this episode, but it's okay. There's like it's like part
I
of an
understand.
episode where he's like, he becomes like a nerd for Sherlock, and he's like got the pipe and he does the voice, and they must have gotten the idea like, let's do an episode where he gets to cosplay. And that brings us to Elementary Dear Data, Season 2, Episode 3, from December 1988, written by Brian Allen Lane, directed by Rob Bowman, once again, directed a lot of episodes. And yeah, McKenna, I kind of set it up, but what do we explore here? What's the deal here?
Geordi wants to solve a Holmes mystery, so he invites along Data, but Data has all of it memorized.
Yes. Data is such a stan.
So they're not really they have this thing where it's like, oh, it's not fun if you know all the answers already. Then they get the season 2 doctor involved. They have there's a different doctor in season 2, Dr. Pulaski.
Yes, that's some weird like show lore, but the doctor in season 2 is not Crusher, it's Dr. Pulaski, and then Crusher comes back for the 3rd season.
So
just
is
to
the
clear
kid
things
gone?
up.
Is the kid
No,
gone
he's
in
still
the second
there.
one?
It's really weird.
But his mom's not there? His mom has been replaced by this other lady?
They're like, your mother got a promotion, but you can stay here if you want. And he's like, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Who wouldn't want to stay on the Enterprise,
Well, the new doctor, is the new doctor Pulaski? No, that's
Pulaski is her name,
Yes.
really like like Kashmir Pulaski,
yeah. She's Polish,
like Pulaski Day. Okay,
Pulaski
interesting.
Highway.
Yeah,
That's a
there's a
Maryland
Pulaski
thing.
Bridge here. There's a Pulaski bridge here, a highway in Maryland, and Kashmir Pulaski Day is like a big thing in Illinois, right?
Yeah. He's
There you go.
honored war hero. Yeah. So
Lovely. Okay, so anyway, what I was going to say is that she is
She's
hot.
awesome.
I guess that's all I wanted to say.
she's so hot. Yeah.
She's like an old lady, not an old lady, but whatever, in her 50s or 60s maybe. I don't know, but she is like shockingly beautiful in my opinion. I was like, whoa, how have I never seen this person before?
She is stunning. She's not a fan favorite. People don't like her, I feel like. I think
Really?
it's turned around now, but people are like, I guess you don't see it, but there's episodes where she's like rude to Picard and stuff like that, and people are like, oh, she's mean. But it's like, to what I was saying with the last episode, like, there aren't a lot of characters early on who like butt heads with other characters, and we see it in this and the next one where like she usually has like an axe to grind a little bit with Data and Worf and stuff, like philosophically, and I always really appreciate that about her character, that like she isn't as like, I don't know, not likable, but she's kind of she likes to challenge people. I think that's fun.
she's asking the hard questions. I really liked her. She was great in this one too, and we got to see her in like an old 19th century English like lady outfit, which was like kind of fun too. It was like, oh, I could like it showed the range of this particular actress in some way.
I really like the theme of this, where it's like the idea of like even just like finding out like how to have fun or something like that, or like what do you get out of like games or art or like that sort of experience, like it's not just about I don't know, it got me thinking actually like weirdly about AI art and stuff like that, and like even though they are just kind of going in acting out this game, it just gave me that, I was thinking about it in that the idea of like we don't just do it to like recite the lines and follow like the ideas that we are taking from something already written, but like the fun is about like exploration of your own creativity and problem solving and things like that. So I don't know, that
and getting
kind
it
of
wrong.
Getting it
that
wrong.
was a big,
Yeah.
Like realizing that you might not know the answer, that it might best you. The story might write you, actually,
And I like that Pulaski she's skeptical of Data in a way that people are, and Data is definitely a different thing, but she's skeptical in a way that people are now of like AI, where she's like, he's not creative, he just is recognizing patterns. Like that's what she posits, which I think is like it's kind of interesting, like to be starting from that, like for a character, you know, not she's like almost like slightly bigoted against Data, which I kind of like, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's the solution to the problem then, McKenna?
So they ask the computer to make a Holmes-like mystery that's, you know, not written by Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah.
With an opponent, an adversary worthy of here's the thing is that there's a little like technicality here where Geordi thinks he's asking for an opponent worthy of Sherlock Holmes, but what really happens is he's asking for an opponent worthy of Data, who has quite a lot of capabilities, and so they go into this holodeck, this holosuite program, and you know it starts out pretty normal, and then they notice that, well, you see Moriarty, who is, you know, Holmes's
his adversary,
biggest adversary, but he sees the holodeck exit, and then he's like kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And then eventually the weird things start happening in the program, like you know, the ship starts coming through. When Geordi and Data find Moriarty, they realize that he has access to the computer.
So freaky.
So, which is not
awesome.
the thing that's happened before.
This should
They can't turn off the program.
Well, that's the thing too. So this is a holodeck episode. I guess we should have maybe explained that to people, which is like, it's sort of like like real life VR. You know, you go into a room and you're just like transported via technology, like into a holographic type world, which is a great invention for the show. It allows them to do a lot of fun types of episodes. But
it seems like a great addition to the show, like just from a narrative perspective, but also I'm like, damn, we've been trying to create this like for years, you know what I mean? Like this is VR. It's like all that we want. It's smell-o-vision, it's VR, it's AR, it's everything.
Like it. I mean, that's the thing with Star Trek, is it does inspire a lot of people to then manifest the technology, or even with I remember in reading Masters of Doom, they were very inspired to like create 3D games because of the holodeck. They were like blown away by that concept. But
so awesome.
It does raise a couple questions. Like there's some, it's kind of a outdated talking point at this point, but the holodeck does raise some red flags, I think. Like in the first season, you know, it broke and they were in like a noir type story, and it broke and tried to kill them. And then here they're just able to ask it a question, like create a guy, and it creates something that almost destroys the ship. And it's like, there really needs to be like this feels like maybe it needs a couple tests before it was fully, like, imagine the last generation holodecks, you know, that they were like trying to get up and running on like the Enterprise C or whatever, you know.
You're a damn nerd. It also feels like it again is like it's prescient to this particular episode, because it's like, I mean, it's not only is Dr. Pulaski asking the questions about Data that you know, again, perhaps this is like a tired thing to say, but like that we're asking about AI and stuff, but that like the greater question of like, well, on one level we have Data, who's like a real object and a real entity. And then we have Moriarty, who is like not a real person. I mean, he's a character with his own memories, and he's a computer program. So then like but he is able to beat Data, who's also able to beat the real people. I mean, it's just it's so prescient, I think, in the things that we are all confronting with the barrage of AI stuff, like these questions that we've always like waxed poetic about for like decades, but now we're kind of like, what is the value of AI, and what does it really mean to like create something or be sentient, you know?
Yeah, I really liked like Moriarty, like the character in this, like, and his like kind of like this. I kind of felt for him, like his struggle, because like he was just like, at least in his memory, you know, he's going about his life as like an evil doctor or whatever, and then all of a sudden, like he just has like this like almost religious like experience, you know, like this great, like this insane awakening.
I loved him. I felt for him so much. I thought he was like, I don't know who's the actor. He looks familiar. I'm sure he's been in. He seems like he might be one of your guys.
Yeah, actually, what was it? There was something he was in recently, but yeah, he not recently, but we watched something with him recently, I believe. But yeah, that actor is amazing. Shoot, I should have had his name.
He's so good. I could pull it up easily too, I guess. But he's so incredible at being like, because he's not really that evil. Like, he's just in this particular, you know, episode or the story that we see, that he has a grudge against Sherlock Holmes. He's Moriarty, you know, but like he believes that he's real. It's like so it's so messed up that he's like, so you're telling me that you're going to turn me off and that I won't, like, it's the fact that he knows it. That's the problem, right? Because if he was just turned off, it wouldn't matter. You know, it's the self-awareness that's like suddenly like, really traumatizing and like horrifying to him. Oh, it's like, it's pretty sad actually.
It's obviously, it's like a classic Star Trek kind of moral quandary where it's like, well, now if we turn him off, like we're killing a guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did you think of Moriarty?
Yeah, cool guy.
That was
once he's reasoned with a bit, you know, he was programmed to be evil, but once he like gains his own awareness, you know, they kind of reason with him, and he's like, okay.
Well, that's what's cool is like, I think like really the first like kind of full scene we have with him, he's like, yeah, I've like pretty much given up on that. Now I'm just trying to figure out what the hell's going on. I like that.
Yeah,
that's like
he totally gives up on being evil. Kind of. He's like, I just like, now I'm just keeping the doctor hostage because now I want to know what's going on, as opposed to like, I'm trying to beat, you know, my opponent, you know. So he still has the same kind of like ill intentions, but like it's because he's now like facing an existential crisis instead of like, you know, trying to be like, curse you, Sherlock.
He makes her tea and crumpets.
Oh God, the scenes those are the best parts. The scenes between the two of them, they're both killing it, and like Pulaski is on fire there, where he's like probing her, and she's having to like deflect the conversations and act like ignorant about the things, and he knows she's lying. It's just like, oh, that's high caliber stuff right there.
Yeah, the chemistry was unreal. I was like, are you guys is this something here?
I got a vibe. Yeah.
I got a vibe, but I was like, is this going where I think it's going? No, never mind, it's not going there. But no, it was the chemistry is like so good. Yeah, she's on fire, she's lying, she's like, it's great. It's so good. The chemistry is like, and I was, because of this episode, interested in the chemistry between Data and what was the guy with the visor?
Geordi.
He's like Geordi.
Yeah.
Geordi and Data seem to have like a really nice thing going.
Yeah, they're best buds.
I was like, I want to see more of that relationship, which I think is really like Like, what does it mean to have your best friend is an android? That's kind of an interesting question. I don't know if they ever get into that, but it's an interesting question.
They do, yeah. Geordi isn't the most explored character on the show, and in fact, sometimes it's like he has some like offensively bad episodes, I feel like. But the relationship between him and Data is very sweet, and it makes sense. He's like the biggest nerd on the ship, basically. Or he becomes the chief engineer, So him and Data are like the perfect pair. It's very sweet, yeah. You mentioned I like how it kind of ends with like really Picard shows up dressed impeccably, by the way.
They gotta have a meeting about this, because this is like this holodeck thing becomes a ship security issue.
Yes.
So they have a classic senior staff meeting.
We love the senior staff meeting. That's one thing, Trek excels at, is meeting scenes. But yeah, it's always like, that's another like great part about the holodeck, is always an excuse to get them dressed in like a cool period costume that they've got lying around.
He looks awesome.
I mean, that's just the thing going back way with the original series, was like they were like, we can just do episodes set in all types of settings and use props from other shows, and boom, budget saved.
So cool. I love it. Budget saved.
Basically this is the same thing happens, as like, the safety protocols have been turned off. You shouldn't let your video games be able to turn off the thing that doesn't kill you. That's for
maybe they should like reconsider having a setting where you can.
Just why would you need? I mean, I guess they've used it before to kill other people, or like they do use it in some episodes, I think. Picard uses it in that one movie where we won't get into that, but I like the first of all, also they can't get her out. They're like, we can dump all the memory, but that'll also kill Pulaski, so we can't do that. So we gotta go and talk to him. And I love the little scene where they're going in and Worf is there dressed up too, and they're like, why don't you just stay?
Yeah.
We don't want to freak him out.
You're not gonna fit in.
Which is very funny. Riker kind of takes a little dig at him.
Yeah.
It's cute. But yeah, I love that it's like they just they go in, they talk it out, and they're good. Like that's the conflict resolution of the show. And I think it's really well done. Like,
I think we talked about this when we talked about the motion picture, where a lot of the problem solving is in Star Trek is like talking it out.
Yeah, coming to there's battle episodes certainly, but none here that we're talking about.
There were no battles, I think, in any. Well, maybe kind of with lore. No. But there was some like physical elements, but like there's like the threat of physical violence, I think, is there. That's the threat that they have to talk through. But no, I love that they just like they just got to talk it out, which is kind of how life often works.
They did pretty much, kill Lore, but it was in self-defense, at least, from what we can tell. Androids can probably float around in space fine for a while, but here actually I had read that so I don't know if you caught this gaffe, but Moriarty gives them the paper and then they take it out of the holodeck and it stays. It doesn't disappear. Which they've in the first holodeck episode, they tricked the computer characters that were going to kill them to leave the holodeck, and then they just disappear or whatever. And it's obviously whatever. It's nerd stuff to care about this. We were watching the first episode. Wesley gets drenched with water, and he comes out, and he's all wet. Whatever. Who cares? Doesn't matter. But they did actually want to make that the ending of the episode, is they wanted to trick Moriarty by showing them that there was the exit and that things can come outside of the holodeck, so that he would leave the holodeck and then die. But I believe, I can't remember who fought for it. I think maybe Roddenberry did, but like he's like, no, we don't want Picard. It will make him look weak. It'll make him look like, I'm pretty sure it was Roddenberry, because it'll make him look like flawed, you know, like a killer, you know. And they were like, look,
or just that like he got bested by Moriarty and had to hit below the belt, you know.
Yeah. And so they were just like, no, it makes him look cunning, but no, they didn't go with that. And I like that they didn't go with that. That's a Roddenberry suggestion. I think it makes for a better ending.
Yeah, I really liked the ending of him saying, hey, like you're like being totally honest with him, being like, yep, you are a program, you're on a spaceship in our time, many years into the future. We've like figured out how to do this, and this is what you are. And the best I can say to you is that we can save your program, and that we can we can call you back to life. That's all we can do, you know, in the future. So, and like it seems to perhaps not please Moriarty, but it makes him feel okay. But it's still like pretty sad.
It was a sad ending. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. So now we've got 3 guys who have just been made over these 2 episodes by other guys. So we got a trend going. We got stories about making conscious beings, which isn't fun, but
yes, sentience, and creating a race, being a parent, all this stuff coming up in the next couple episodes as well.
Next time on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
It's unjustified. It's unfair. He has rights.
A Starfleet experiment threatens to dismantle Data for android research.
And what's at stake? My very life.
Now, Captain Picard is Data's last hope for survival.
What is he? A machine.
And now a man will shut it off.
Objection.
On Star Trek: The Next Generation.
yeah. So let's talk about it. This is the big one. This is like one of the. It's probably the standout of the early few seasons, The Measure of a Man, where we really start dealing with it. It's season 2, episode 9, first aired February 1989, written by Melinda M. Snodgrass, directed by Robert Shearer. And this is, well, what is it, McKenna?
This is the legal drama episode.
we get those in Star Trek a handful of times as well.
So, this man, I forget his name.
Bruce Maddox.
Yes,
he's from the Daystrom Institute.
To the ship, and he wants to disassemble Data because he thinks he's almost figured out how to make more Datas.
Yes.
But he needs to get in there and see some stuff.
So that's an interesting point in the show. You've only said one line, but it's an interesting point in the show. He's continued the work of Data's creator, like they found his files or whatever, and they're going off of it. And they really sell that it is like very difficult to create something like Data. And I think you know, they obviously weren't thinking of like AI that would be developed like around now, but I still think it holds true. Like I think this show takes place like, I can't remember, the 24th century or something like that, and I'm still like I don't know if this is really possible, like to create like a sentient being. But I think the show, to its credit, even not. Sometimes they totally miss like certain things. Other times they're right on the money. And I think this is like a fair portrayal, like that this is like a momentous undertaking to create an actual like thinking creature. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, no. I just had a thought that this episode would probably pair really well with a Voyager episode. a certain, but that's for another.
Yeah, Voyager's got its own data, and it's a different story. But yeah.
So they talk to Data about this disassembly thing, but Data has some concerns. He's not convinced that Maddox can disassemble him without issues. So
you've built a neural net. How did you overcome the something or others and the something or something?
Yeah,
and he's like, I'll figure it out.
I haven't, but I'll figure it out while. Can you imagine if like you're talking to a surgeon and they're like, I don't know yet, but I'm gonna figure out while I have you cut open.
Once I get a good look at your brain,
it can't be that hard. Yeah, okay. I'll know what to do.
Sure. So Data's like, no, but Maddox. Well, Picard backs him up on it, and then Maddox is like, well, I've got a transfer order for you to be under my command, so then you have to do it. And that's where the conflict begins, because they're like, hold on. If Data was just like another regular crew member, they would be able to say no to this. So
and they try to get around it by him like quitting. Like he's like, I'm gonna quit Starfleet, like I'm retiring.
Yes.
Not in the Blade Runner sense of retiring, but I'm retiring, not gonna be here, so that way you can't transfer me. And then the issue becomes, well, you can't retire because you're property of Starfleet. So not only can you not say no, but you can't quit either, because we own you.
We own you.
And this was actually, so I used to have, I've had 2 Star Trek podcasts in the past before, but I had one backtracking. We talked about the inspirations, and I believe Melinda Snodgrass had said, like, is inspired by a lot of things, but part of it is like the Dred Scott case, like that type of thing of like, having your like, this is something that's actually happened, like having your personhood argued in court, basically, Sorry.
I mean, yeah, that's what happens next. There's a like lawyer type who's on board,
Philippa Lavoie,
for other reasons.
Well, they're at a star base, and they're setting up. She's setting up like it's like kind of on a farther out outpost, and so they're kind of getting their whole like law office like set up there. So,
right. So they don't have any, legal people there.
Yes.
It's like they have to get the crew. They have to get Picard and Riker to argue this case. Which
is a conflict of interest, I think. But
yeah,
I do think I think they're trying to get over the idea of like Starfleet values are like, everyone here is an honest actor, and even though Riker is his friend, we trust in him to what she say when when we have an honest disagreement or something, like basically the idea is like they believe everyone is acting in good faith, which is a little fishy. I think I feel like Riker maybe couldn't actually do it, but I accept whatever. Riker did a good job. He owned him a couple times, so
yeah. I mean, that's the idea, is that like Riker doesn't want Data to be disassembled and leave and whatever, and wants and Data's his buddy and his comrade, but he has to basically represent the other guy. So he has to like fight against Data's personhood, which was kind of, I feel like that was one of the weaker parts of the episode to me, just because I was like, afterwards I was like, well, would it have worked better if it was somebody else, somebody random, like a different, prosecutor or whatever. But because to me, it's like we had to just sort of, as you said, like take it at face value that he was like able to argue against his friend, and he did it like flawlessly. He did a really good job making the case that like Data should be treated as an object, which I thought was like just sort of strange. Like, I don't know, does that it felt like it didn't need to be him, because they didn't really show any real conflict. Like at the end of the episode, he's kind of like, I feel really bad about this. Like, how can you ever forgive me for arguing against you? And then Data's like, no, it's okay. Like, don't worry about it, man. It's okay. Kind of. So I don't know. I wondered why they made that choice.
I think they're just like I said, they're really into like them, like overcoming these obstacles between them, like this and Elementary Dear Data with Geordi and the ship in the end. Like that ends with Picard being like, we're cool, man. We're all good. Like, I support you. And, you know, like we've mentioned, that sort of like no conflict thing does create obstacles for the show, but there are times where it's like, man, that is really nice that like I'm like, Picard is a good captain, you know? He's like,
yeah, he is a good
make
captain.
sure everything's like good, everything's cool. And you know, here I'm like, man, Riker is a good friend, you know? Like, I was really sold on that.
Yeah. Man, Picard, I really understand. I get it. He rocks. And Patrick Stewart is just like really incredible. I mean, obviously, like, duh, we know that. But like, boy, really seeing him at his prime, he looks great, even though he's got male pattern baldness. It's like really,
he's a babe.
He's got a whole thing going on. And him and the judge, or the acting judge, whatever her name is. Well, yeah, clearly they had some sort of thing, and I was like, well, I want to know what happened with that, because they're like meeting again and they have this like banter, and he's like, I hate you, and she's like, no, you don't, you know, whatever. But
yeah,
and anyway, it is true that it felt like everybody, like the only people who were really, well, Picard, Data, and then the guy who wanted to disassemble Data were acting like in their own, like they were being. They weren't caught up in the legality of like having to like be impartial or whatever, because they could just really like be honest about like, this is what I believe to be true. So it's interesting that the acting judge and Riker both had to like be more, you know, they had to like actually be like judges and like lawyers, how they actually have to act, you know. You don't always get to defend people that you really believe are innocent, you know.
Shows their commitment to their duty.
Yeah,
there
does.
There is like a scene where like Riker, it's like a little moment where Riker's like pulling up Data's specs to like, you know, find arguments against him and make these really mean, you know, arguments that he makes where he like takes them apart and stuff. But there's a moment where he's looking at it and you can tell he's looking at it like, oh man, Data is like crazy and impressive. And then you can tell it later, it's when he discovers like the whole off switch and this stuff where like his face changes to this look of, oh shit, like fuck, I'm gonna have to do this. And it's it hits hard. It hits hard, especially upon rewatch, because you know like what he's gonna do next, you know.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
What's the case basically? I mean, they argue, is Data sentient? Is he conscious? What's the deal?
I think that is like, they're not even sure what they're trying
that's true
to prove.
They're trying to work it out. Yeah,
it's true.
But I think Riker is trying to show that Data is a machine.
Bend this bar.
At first, Picard is trying to prove that Data is sentient, I guess. But then he has this conversation with Guinan.
Yes.
During their recess, where she's like,
awesome. That's the best scene.
They talk about, you know.
And this is Whoopi Goldberg.
Yes.
Everyone.
Yes.
This scene really is one for the books.
Yeah, she's like, you know, this isn't the first time in history where we were like, the humanity of people has been argued, and basically people were enslaved, and the argument was that these people were less than human. And this you know makes Picard realize that this case is more than just about Data. This case is setting a precedent for android rights for the future. Especially as like this is where the whole point is that Maddox thinks he can make more there. So maybe they're about to create more, and we're here deciding on their rights now.
Mm-hmm.
And if they like, yeah, the idea of like, if we're just making them to be subservient to us, like, yeah, I don't know. They're like, I like what you said. Like, they don't even like fully settle it by the end, but it is sort of like, we cannot commit to doing this for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I like that it's like there's still an open question there. It like gives Data as a character, I guess, more room to grow and stuff and explore. Like she says, I want to let him explore that for himself.
They're basically like, we don't know, like, if you have surpassed your original programming, like if you've gained sentience and humanity, but we're open to the idea that maybe you have, or maybe you will, and that we're not gonna like just shut it all down right here and set up a world where we have android slaves.
Yeah. It's almost like if you're going to make more of these, like, well, one, you're gonna have to figure out how to do it without killing these people, killing people, and like, you really like, I guess they will get to that more in the next episode, but it's like you have to do that with the consideration that you're making another person potentially, at least potentially.
You're making a life, yeah. And if the idea is that you're making them just like for your own devices, like, that's a very dangerous, approach. And that's what I like, that there's some line that Whoopi Goldberg says, but she's like she like asks a question. She's like, I don't know, but it could be, like she's just sort of like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
She's so awesome in that episode.
But it could happen. She's like the bartender, I guess.
She's the bartender. Yeah.
She's so she rocks so hard in this, but
she has a mysterious origin, which is fun.
Oh, yeah. I like that.
You don't really see much from her in this, but she's kind of a cool, like, what's her deal character,
I definitely wondered what her deal was. She was so wise in this episode. She's kind of got the Telma energy a little bit, to bring in a Zelda reference.
Yeah.
No, this episode was really like special. Like, you don't even really need to. There was one thing that you did need to know, that you sent me little clips for me to watch to get caught up on, like, one particular, like,
which I think
10-second part of the show, or of the episode, which is like quite relevant. And if I didn't know, it wouldn't have hit. But yeah,
I think
it's a good standalone.
I think they at least, like, they explain it so you'd know what happened, at least,
Yeah, totally.
But that is like kind of like one of the big moments in the court itself, where he like what basically was like, yeah, I've been intimate, and like everyone has, like, some of them almost look horrified a little bit. Like,
yeah, they do.
Like, they're like, oh, this is like bigger than we thought it is.
Totally, like they're like, oh my god, this man has had this item, this guy, because they call him like a toaster. He's just a tool, he's a toaster, but the toaster had relations with a human, like, and he remembers her, and he like thinks about her. It's just like, oh man, it's like very impactful, and they do explain it, like, you didn't have to know the background of it, but it is like, it's impactful.
Tasha, we'll talk more about her some other time, I think, but she kind of got done dirty a little bit, but I like when Picard says, we've known some beings to possess mega strength. I just like that term, mega strength. Because Riker's first argument is, look, he can bend this. Like, I'm already on Data's side, so I'm like, shut the fuck up.
He's like, look at how he can bend this thing. Yeah.
Be like,
He's too strong.
We just had a crystalline entity destroy a whole planet, and I don't think
Right.
Yeah.
Data's out here doing that. There's like a callback. Well, sort of. They talked about Data being a machine, but like Picard's like, oh, humans are also machines, just a different kind. And he says this in an earlier episode, which
That's right.
You know, watching these again, I didn't realize the first time I watched The Measure of a Man because it had been a while between episodes, but watching them right next to each other,
Like they're thinking
he's
about
like,
this.
oh yeah, like this
And
is
it's totally
something
true.
Picard just like pulled out. This is something he's been conscious of.
Yes, yeah. I'm sure a lot of them are thinking about like what they think about Data a lot. That, like what is his deal? I'm sure there's like imagine you're not one of the bridge crew, and in fact, I mean later episodes we watched a clip of that one commander. There's like an episode where he's kind of racist towards Data, and I'm like, I guess I could start to see that if you're like serving aboard some ship and they're like, did you hear there's like an android on this ship and he's a lieutenant, and you're like, you know what I mean, you're like, what?
Yeah.
like you just that would kind of freak me out, right?
Totally.
Sorry, I don't mean to be racist against Data, but
no. Data has a lot of big problems. Okay. besides our own questions about if he's cool or not, but he is ultimately very cool, and that adds to. I mean, the other question is like that they don't really talk. They talk about it a little bit at the beginning, but it's like, what if Data was an asshole or was like evil? What if it was Lore that we were talking about? Like they would probably maybe they would have disassembled Lore because they're like, fuck this guy, Well,
it's kind of too bad they don't just have Lore.
I know they shot him into space. They shouldn't have done that. They could have kept him around but I mean, ultimately the argument is that like we shouldn't do this to any of them because it has these far-reaching precedent-setting implications. But it is like Data is so like has this like childlike wonder in a way and is like very palatable and sweet. So, or at least from what I've seen of Data. So I don't know. It made me. I thought about that. I was like, this could have gone the other way if Data was like a real asshole.
Yeah, they say that to him, right? Like you're just sympathetic to him because like him or whatever, which is like kind of a bad argument, like to make.
Yeah, it's not a good argument.
That makes me think of like a good episode idea would have been like they recover Lore's body and Bruce Maddox wants to tear it apart and Data has to be like, well, you're just because like we should put him in jail, we shouldn't just put him on trial or something, not kill him. But I mean, I want to move on to the next episode, but I did want to just mention Bruce Maddox himself. Like I think the actor was really good. I love especially the scene between him and Data, like in his quarters where he just kind of walks in and
it's so creepy. I
don't know, like, and then by the end where he's like somewhat accepts him, I guess, or he doesn't call him it by the end, like I mean he took it in stride, he didn't get too upset.
Data's also like very generous. Like they finish the trial and he's like, if you figure this out, I'll be here.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about this episode in a future episode if you want to keep talking about Star Trek with us over time. But he straight up, like, we don't ever see Bruce Maddox in TNG again, but we do see, like, the Data corresponds with him and, like, keeps, like, journals and stuff and, like, like, tries to provide him with as much information as he can, which I think is cool, Like
that's really cool.
Data, like they're talking shop in the beginning, and like Data is also in pursuit of this knowledge. So I think that's that brings them together. Yeah, like when he's like, "Are these just words?" It's like, damn, I have that question too.
They do have such a weird, like, it would be an interesting relationship to explore, but like I'm a total sicko, and so I thought it was like weirdly, like almost it was not sexual, but it was like he just sort of is like he like wants ownership over his like his body. You know what I mean? Like he's like just enters into his space and he's like, I think you should, knock first or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's like, oh well, like I don't have to because you're a toaster. Like he. And they also, before we end, they kept saying like Data should have the right to choose, and I'm like, is this a thinly veiled like abortion like metaphor or something?
No,
because
they have a
saying
non-thinly veiled abortion episode. So.
A different one?
Oh yeah, I think there's probably a couple abortion episodes actually. There's literally an episode where it's like we should abort this baby or whatever.
Interesting.
It's not as bad as I'm making it sound right now, but
right.
it is a little weird.
I mean, there was just such clear like racial and like sex implications like to the whole trial about like people who have whatever been subjugated for various reasons and to like resource extraction to various ends in history. And it felt like I feel like the race thing was quite clear because they say like like a race of people, like you're making a new kind of person. But I also felt like this gendered aspect with them when they were saying like Data has the right to choose, and then they also had this like guy who's like really like kind of creeping on him the whole time
and misgendering him.
And misgendering him and going into his space and like and even at the end he's like, God, he's just so fascinating or whatever. He's like kind of in love with him in some, or like at least like is like lusting after him quite literally. So I don't know. Yeah, there were so many like kind of strange aspects of this that I really liked. So anyway, I just wanted to call that out too. That was a part of it. That was very cool.
Data's little going away party is nice too.
Yeah. Data, you want to rip off the paper.
that is so funny to me. This is where I want to be Star Trek guy about it, because like they get all their shit just from like replicators, like unless there's some story where he bought this wrapping paper on some planet, but they would probably just be like, computer, give me some wrapping paper, and then when you're done with your shit you just put it back in and it like dematerializes it. So I like this idea of Data being like, I'm going to save this like they live in abundance, you know what I mean?
Yeah. He's like, but you can use the wrapping paper again. I don't want to rip it.
And he's just like, yeah, that's good. And Geordi all sad. It's like a sweet little moment. Yeah. And even Pulaski has got a bone to pick with Worf. I like that. Just the show does a good job of like having the characters who it's not even about them, but sometimes they'll like slip in a little like very crucial moment for their character. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So you were gonna say something?
Oh, we talked in the last episode about like gaming.
Yes.
And they start this episode with a game of poker.
Oh God, how could we? Oh, we
forgot about that.
Sets it up as
they're always playing poker on the show.
Really?
Data knows. Has learned the rules, but there's, in practice, there are other things in the game of poker.
That ties into that idea of like not just recognizing patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Also, one of my favorite lines in the whole show is said during this. You know what it is?
Which? No. What is it?
I said it, but I always remember when Data's like, yeah, this shouldn't be hard, and O'Brien's like, time to pluck a pigeon. Like, what a weird. I've never heard that term before. Is that like an Irish saying?
I've never heard that either.
So, yeah.
I would have folded with Riker's poker face as well. He did a really good job. I was like, sure, take my money. I don't know.
Dude, he is so good. When Data says, yeah, is this what's called a poker face? And Riker's like, are we playing or what? I'm like, he's so good.
Yeah, it's so awesome. It's so good. Yeah, the poker scene is awesome. And Data's face paint the whole time is completely unhinged, but the face paint under the clear visor is like the next level crazy visual aids.
Data is like scary until season 3. I feel like they figure out his makeup a little bit better, but he is kind of scary early on.
I think he's scary the whole time, but I like it. The face paint is really, they committed to it so aggressively. And he's so shiny.
He's a shiny guy, yeah. But yeah, poker.
Definitely like Tin Man vibes.
They're always playing poker. It comes up a lot. It becomes like one of the, it's a good way to, it's a good framing device for a lot of episodes and stuff like that. Yeah, they're playing it. Anything else about this ep? Let's go on to the grand
finale.
Next time on Star Trek: The Next Generation, Commander Data creates an android child.
I have brought a new life into this world.
But Starfleet's orders leave her an orphan.
I want that android out of here. The child depends on him.
And a deadly malfunction
I am scared.
threatens her life.
I love you, Father.
On Star Trek: The Next Generation.
This ep ends and you're like, yeah, we should really be considerate about making more of these and like the implications of that. So it does come back in season 3, episode 16, The Offspring, March 1990. We're in the 90s now. Written by Renee Echevarria. I always struggle with that name. And directed by Jonathan Frakes. Frakes. We love when he directs an ep. And this is a good one for him because he's mostly absent from the episode.
Is this Riker?
Yes, Riker.
I didn't know. Boy, I just fall more head over heels for Riker every day. I didn't know he also directed episodes. How cool!
He's one of the great.
A lot.
He still directs Trek episodes.
Wow.
This was like a lot of them got to direct episodes, but he really took to it and he really did it a lot. Then he directed one of the films. Then he got to direct a different film that wasn't Star Trek. It bombed and it killed his directing career, but he is still a Trek directing legend. And he is actually, I think he is wonderful. And I think he really understands Star Trek, and he is the antithesis to someone like Shatner, where he could easily make it all about him. He's he's often in the captain's chair. He's basically co-captain, but he always finds a way to shine while not overshadowing anyone. Doesn't really have to do with this episode, but I love Jonathan Frakes, so I wanted to shout him out.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So yeah, what do they do?
Data has a child.
Yeah, that's basically the episode, right?
Yeah, it grapples a lot with the things going on in the previous episodes we've watched.
Yes.
The creating more androids, whether she has rights.
They kind of have to go through a similar rigmarole.
Yeah, it's big. Hey, remember we had this court case where we argued that androids have rights, and now you're trying to do the same, not the same exact thing, but you're ignoring Data's offspring's rights and Data's rights here.
Yeah. Which I think it's this is a good follow-up. It's because they do, like we said, they kind of leave it open for interpretation by the end of the last one. It's definitely something they don't want to fully come down on. And so I don't know, this feels like a good it's not as people don't remember this one as strongly as say Measure of Man, but I think it's a very smart follow-up to that episode.
This episode was amazing. This episode was amazing. He creates, without anyone knowing, a child, an offspring, another android using his own programming, right?
Yeah. Yeah, basically it's they almost have the same brain essentially. He downloads his own memories and stuff into her. It's very, it helps speed along the process a little bit, but she's not a clone of him or anything. She's like her own new entity.
She gets to choose.
She gets to choose her. It's so cool. I love that.
Data's very woke. Yeah, he's doing the.
She could have been a Klingon.
That would have been a weird choice. I do like this was kind of racist, where Deanna's like, yeah, a friend for Worf, and it's like, what? She's not. It's like, oh, she looks like a Klingon. She'll be Worf's friend.
Like Worf has like weird relationships with other Klingons too. Like,
yeah, it's like, hold on now. My favorite one. It's another line. I said it. That's one of my nerdy. I'll say it along as it happens when they go and human female, and she goes, I like her.
I like that part too. I noted I like her, and then just on to the next one, and that's the one they picked. That's the one they picked.
That must.
I like her.
I do like that though. Of like, Trek is often very like forward thinking, and I think this was a case where it was obviously like, the scene where they're just going around like clocking people, like female, male. Like obviously that's a little different now. We don't just look at someone and I mean, obviously, you don't just go like woman, man, you know what I mean? It's not that simple, but I think it was pretty forward thinking in that the idea of like letting you choose how you want to be perceived and express yourself. Yeah.
I feel like those two aspects were like tempered, because I mean it's part of the bigger conversation, right? Of like, of course you label people. You don't go around saying it, but that's why gender matters, because it's how you want to be perceived, right? So like I think that those two things actually like worked together. Like I like you when I saw them doing the like, no, you're a woman. No, I'm a woman. Whatever it is, like it's like sort of awkward and like it wouldn't be handled that way now. But I do think that like that's exactly the point, is that like the way that you present matters and you get to choose it. So that was that I thought it was kind of cool.
I do love when she's like, I choose your gender and appearance.
I know. She's like, I want to be you. And she's like, not. That would be confusing. That would be confusing.
I get that. She has, what's the Emmy nominated hairstyles, so I would want to look like Troy as well, for sure.
Yeah, she looks awesome. She looks awesome. Yeah, but we choose the human female. Like she's not really I liked that she was like, her appearance was like 13 or something. Like she was they kept calling her a child, but she wasn't really a child. Yeah. But she was short. But
it's
she was like,
it's similar to how we were saying with Data. She's like very childlike,
Right. Like the kid, like she seemed like she was at a point where you're like figuring yourself out, when you're like the ages of like 9 to 16, somewhere in there, because you like, that's when you're growing up. And so I thought that was sort of smart to have her like be in this, like this time, it appeared to be that she was in that period, because that's exactly where she is mentally as well.
Yeah. And we're kind of exploring with her an era we didn't really see for Data, like those early moments. And I don't know. I felt like her struggle. I felt for sure.
They have this part where she's going to school and trying to figure out what class, like group to put her in, because she's got like the intelligence of the older kids. Like she knows a lot of things, but emotional intelligence wise, she's more in line with the younger kids. She doesn't know how to interact with people, so they put her with the younger kids, but then like she's like, clearly she's not even on like their level of emotional intelligence, so they're all grouped together and she's off in the corner.
Yeah, I gotta give props to I don't know the actress's name. We'll have to look that up. But she does a good job of acting like very like I am a robot, but also like there's those serious scenes they have where she's talking to Data and she's like, I don't want to be different, and I'm like, fuck, man, that like
she does a great job. Like I felt right. I mean, it was the writing as well, but like her. portrayal where it's like it's so confused without being muddled, and like she brings like emotionality to it that's also removed. She did a really, really good job. And then like the writing where they're like, Data just says stuff to her because that you wouldn't have to say, you wouldn't say it like that to like a person, where he's like, they were not laughing with you, they were laughing at you. And which like you probably should say to people sometimes, but we usually sugarcoat things here on planet Earth. But I think that like it was so strange to like watch the character get more emotionality, like, and but yet still like not be offended by anything really, but just want to be like searching for like her own humanity, which she like does find and is sort of her undoing. And
she does a thing, you know.
I didn't see her, yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. The actress is Haley Todd. And according to Memory Alpha, she is perhaps best known for playing Lizzie McGuire's mom on Lizzie McGuire.
What? Okay, this is big news for me. I'm looking this up because boy was I a big Lizzie McGuire fan. Rules.
Show me a picture when you got one.
I'm going to right now. But, okay, go on.
So with her, like, this is a thing that Star Trek does really good, where it's like there's times where it's like extremely sad, or times where it's like extremely goofy, or like really corny, and like I don't know, I think she just does like all of that in this. I love where she's walking around like she looks way different. I feel like
she's blonde and
it does look like her, but she's blonde and 45. So
yeah,
but I like her like walking, like talking to Data, and she's doing the whole kid like why thing, and he's just I love why is the sky black? It's like
why is the sky black? I loved that.
Or like they're train, she's like the little montages of her trying to catch the ball or drinking the liquid. Again, more guy.
Or learning how to blink. That was a good one.
How to blink, mm-hmm. And a more Guinan, of course, is always nice. I like her trying to one of my all-time favorite lines in the show once again is when she goes, "He's biting that female."
yeah.
And then
she works at the bar to like learn about humanity, which is such a good. It's so smart. Of course, that's where you should learn. He's biting that female.
Yeah, she learns about
when they were making out.
She learns about kissing, and then she's like, "I want to do that."
Scene before they're
Riker.
Like, Admiral Riker has returned, or not Admiral. Sorry, Commander Riker has returned, and he comes in and kisses.
Yeah. She grabs him and plants one right on the kisser.
Data. That's another thing too.
That was all the viewers.
Something we haven't talked about, but I think shows in a lot of episodes, but even in ones we haven't watched at this point, is like Data. I think he constantly tells us that he doesn't have emotion, but then exhibits that he like does often. I think. I don't know if you got this from these, but I remember when I watched through the first season, even I had a podcast we only got through the first season, but I remember a lot of times being like, Data has feelings, and he can make I think he's really funny when he was like, throwing the "what are your intentions with my daughter" type line.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think he's like clever and creative. I mean, I don't know. That's a great scene.
Yeah, that scene is great.
But
all of us want to plant one on Riker. So
all of us,
we were all just living vicariously through her.
It really pisses off the Admiral or whatever, or is it an I can't remember. There's a couple different guys who come in, but he's really not happy. Halftel is not happy that they've got her working in a bar or whatever, which I think is funny. It's like you want to like study her,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if your outcome is much better, but I also liked this actor who played the Admiral dude. It was like, you know, he's a little different than Maddox, and like his intentions didn't feel like it wasn't like Maddox. He's like obsessed with like his own personal experiments and prestige. At one point he says like, what about my right not to have my life's work ruined or whatever? Whereas like Halftel's more of like, he's like doing his duty. Feels like, you know, he's executing his orders or whatever, you know, and in their mind they're doing what they think is right, I guess, you know, like for they at least think like for the greater good of like, we should study her and, you know, whatever. And I don't know, like by the end, I guess like he has the same, it's almost sudden similar to Maddox, but he has that sort of like come to Jesus moment by the end where, you know, after what he's seen, you know, he's a changed guy a little bit. His heart has changed.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is that they're like, well, we can't like have like, we need to like, his argument is a little like muddied, but the idea is that like they don't want her on the ship. She was a surprise to everyone that he created an offspring, and he's kind of like, well, like, you guys don't have to be authorized to get pregnant, you know, like I'm allowed to just like have offspring as well, similar to the right to choose kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, and then the Admiral is like, but I don't like, she hasn't, like we need to be like careful with this like new life form that we don't know, like if this is the best. Like, we don't really know what's going to happen here. And then they finally ask her, they're like, well, what do you want? Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And she's like, I want to stay, I think. But she said, but that's when she experiences fear. She experiences fear, and that like breaks her because she's like, I'm feeling something. I feel. That scene destroys me every time. I cried. When she's like punching her chest or whatever. Like, ugh. I know. Poor Lal. Yeah, she's like, I feel. And then, and then they're like, it like breaks her. Like literally her programming is like all fucked up because she broke through her programming. And then they have to do like emergency surgery on her to try to like fix her. And then there's this like heartbreaking last like couple of lines that they have where it's not like gory or, you know, whatever. Like she doesn't look sick, but she's just like about to be turned off or whatever, decommissioned. And she's like, thank you for my life. Oh, so sad. Data. I'm okay. It's touching at the end where Data is like, you know, I've downloaded her memories or whatever, and it's like, I know, it's so sweet. and again, Halftel is like describing the like surgery basically they're doing. He's like, I'll help you, you know, and I mean he should. He basically caused it. But where he comes out and he's like traumatized from it basically. Yeah, he's like he's freaked out. He's like, that was really hard to like we did everything we could. Data's hands were moving faster than I could keep track of or whatever. It's kind of unsaid in this scene, but they point out in another scene that he has like kids himself, so I can only imagine like he saw in that like what he might have experienced, you know, but like to this inhuman degree where he couldn't even keep up with Data, you know. Yeah. Ugh. It's so sad. It's really, thank you for my life is like the craziest line. Yeah. That's so, they were really going for the heartstrings with that one. Yeah. And oof, that's a tough one. Yeah, I know. But a great way to end the arc. Yes. Like it really feels like we kind of went like full circle on the whole Data, the whole Data character. I mean, of course, I'm sure there's much more. And now but I will say, I'm like, I'm so spoiled now. I'm like, well, I just want another curated set of episodes about another character, about Whoopi Goldberg's character or Riker or LeVar Burton.
I'm
or
like,
whoever else.
I'm way ahead.
Yeah.
I've been working on this now. But well, I want to say I like the with this episode. What was I gonna say? There's one. I had one final. Oh, we just with similar to what I was saying about Datalore, where we've seen like two different responses to characters like gaining these feelings that Data obtains, and they've been catastrophic, you know. So that's kind of a I don't know, just sort of an interesting like thing for him, like that he still has to press on with his, you know, his mission of becoming more human or whatever, but yet there's been for everyone he's known that's been an android, it's been they've died because of it, basically.
Yeah, it's been catastrophic. Yeah, it's very true. Like maybe he is the best version of himself because he can't actually feel. I mean, you know, allegedly, or he doesn't know that he's feeling. You know, that kind of self-awareness might be his undoing.
I do though I have made some curated episodes for future episodes if you're down to do.
I'm very down. I feel like this is the best way. I recommend anybody who's listening, if you perhaps, I don't know what it's like to be a real Trek head, but from where I'm sitting, it was really great to watch these episodes. You should watch them, even if you know what happens, because we've been talking about them. You should still watch them. They're really fun, and it's a great way to enjoy the show, I think, and a bespoke way by our friends Goo and McKenna to enjoy the show.
I guess we have something mapped out, but I am kind of curious. You said like you had characters. You're like, oh, you said Guinan, but yeah, what are the characters you're like, I want to know more about them?
Guinan, I mean, just because she's great. Whoopi Goldberg. Riker, because I have a crush on him. I like can't remember his name. Again, he's the nerd with the glasses.
Geordi.
I like Geordi a lot.
Okay. Nice.
Picard, like I want to know more about Picard and his lady friend who was the judge. But Picard, yes. I feel like would be. I mean, Picard, it just shines so brightly in every episode, and it's just like a warm hug. And so, but perhaps there are some like really, you know, I feel like a Picard arc would be a bigger undertaking. You'd have to just watch the whole thing, probably.
We'll get to Picard stuff. There is, I don't know. Well, we might find a way to weave it in, but he was talking a little bit about. He was court-martialed from his last ship, Stargazer. They talk about that in that episode, and she did the trial, the court-martial on him. And there are some earlier episodes where we like learn a little bit about that. It's not like the most interesting thing that's ever happened to Picard, but we might find ways to weave that in. But it's not going to be like make or break if you know that or not. So.
Yeah, it seems like it was not terribly important.
There's some good stuff, but yeah. Yeah,
well, if you want to share, or you can keep your poker face up about what you're cooking up over there. But
I'll tease what our next one will be. Which who knows when we'll get, this is Flashback 64. We've got Nintendo 64 games and stuff to talk about,
yeah.
but. The
entire 90s.
We're actually, the flashback part has become, I hope people are, no one has said anything bad, but I hope people are okay that we've become just like a 90s cultural podcast, but I think we keep it grounded.
I think it's great.
Nintendo.
And I listen, like, it's like the show hasn't stopped doing those, it hasn't stopped doing all the Nintendo 64 stuff. And so I think that's like, if people don't want to listen to the other stuff, then they don't have to.
That's our flagship. Once a month, you'll get that.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll get some other, well, yeah, we don't have to get into it, but you've seen all the GoldenEye episodes, the Mischief Makers episodes. Get ready for the Diddy Kong episodes. It's going to be crazy.
Oh, Go off.
But here I'll tease the next set of episodes that we will talk. At least at this point, I might change my mind. But we're going to learn a little bit about. So Data was my favorite character initially, but now I think my favorite character in all of Star Trek is actually Worf. And
Worf,
that's what I was gonna. I was like, I wonder if you gotta have a Worf arc. I know.
Well, multiple. There's gonna be multiple.
He early TNG Worf is like not as big of a character. He becomes
So I have a season
and
1.
He's in the next. He's in Deep Space Nine as well.
Yes.
Oh, same character.
So yeah.
His big arc happens on TNG, but he has there's a lot of good stuff with him that's almost as strong. Well, there's some really strong stuff, I would say, in Deep Space Nine. But what he's his iconic storyline is on TNG. But
okay. He was not present in these episodes hardly at all.
Yeah.
A couple of lines here and there. So I didn't even think about him. So this is exciting.
In our next episode, we will learn his backstory. And we will
Worf lore.
Yeah, we'll see some of his personal struggles, and also you haven't had any you've gotten to avoid a lot of Star Trek geekery, but we're gonna learn about what's going on with the Klingons, which is what he
Everybody
is.
buckle up.
So we're gonna see what they're doing in the 90s.
Nice. Nice.
And it's gonna like Data, it will set us up for more. It's actually it's by the end of it, it's part 1 of his. It's the first act of his big arc in the show, and then later we will see the other stuff. But anyway, that was a lot of fun. I think Adrielle, thank you for coming on and talking about Star Trek with us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you both very much. Big fan, long time listener, first time caller. That's not true, but
Do you want to plug anything?
Definitely not. I call all the time. Well, Gu and I do our little show called Movies That Whip, which is pretty self-explanatory, just based on the name. We talk about movies. It's essentially like a book club, but we talk about movies. It's kind of what we just did today. So
yeah,
some of those have been released on the Flashback 64 feed, but we have a good time and we watch freaky movies that we would not otherwise watch, which is it's a lot of fun. It's a good little book club treehouse we've got going on. So you could check that out. Otherwise, I'm on Discord. If anyone needs anything, I'm on Discord. So
come into our Discord and tag Adrielle.
You'll find me there.
We're on so many podcasts. We started on the virtual theater feed and then migrated to our own feed, and then we've still spilled out into other feeds.
I know. And meanwhile, sometimes we are on the Zelda cast, and there's kind of a lot that we're
weed.
They can't get rid of us. They just can't. Try as they might.
Anything do we want to promote?
Our link. We got our links. We got our Discord.
Check out our links.
Call me on the links.
Yeah, listen to us here wherever you're currently listening to us. Keep doing that.
Right. Do me a favor if you're even still listening, and go write a review somewhere saying you like the bonus episodes. 5-star review saying you like all the filler content. And if you do not actually you leave a 5-star review and say you don't like it, but give us 5 stars.
Nice. That's great. That's a good compromise.
Or just lie and say you like it. So,
yeah. And then you can message me on Discord and say we don't like those, and then I will temper it and say, hey guys, I got an anonymous comment from someone.
Yeah, Adrielle can reword it, make it nicer.
Yeah, I'll do some PR for you.
All right, well, thanks everyone for listening. We will see you out there in space. Bye.
Bye.
Space. Bye.
as always, we want to extend a special thank you to our Millennium Star tier patrons over on Patreon. So thank you Infection Form, Jeremy Aber, Kiefer, Nico, Paul, and Underline V. For anyone out there who wants to check us out on Patreon, we are at patreon.com/flashback64. Thank you.